Hi, I'm Louise, and today I'm going to be ranking Ridley Scott's filmography. I saw Gladiator for the first time earlier this year. I'd been meaning to watch it for a long time, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. I kind of thought it was like a dad movie. I ended up loving it, and because of that, I was like, well, Gladiator 2 is going to be coming out this year, so I might as well watch all his movies and see what I think. Little did I realize Ridley Scott has directed almost 30 movies over the course of his career, over almost 50 years at this point. And he has so many genres, it's kind of hard to pin down what exactly is a Ridley Scott film. He's got sci fi, historical dramas, he's got rom-coms, he's got crime thrillers, he's got war films, almost anything under the sun you can think of, he's got a movie for it almost. I've never tried to do something like this, but it's been so much fun. I've watched probably almost 65 hours of films that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. Some of them, not all of them. I found that sometimes people have a hard time taking me serious when I recommend a movie because I like most of them. I love movies and I like watching them. But what I've learned about myself is I am really good at seeing a trailer for something or feeling out the vibe of a movie and knowing if I'm going to like it or not. Because there's a lot of stuff in this list that I watched because of the list and wouldn't have watched otherwise that I didn't love. And that's not a bad thing. I think there's a lot to learn from movies that you don't like. But I will say this about Ridley Scott's filmography. None of his movies are ugly. I think consistently all of his movies look pretty great. And this is because he started out in the production design team. And so his eye is more about the overall image. He did a lot of commercial work before he started directing feature films. And so he talked about how he was like, I need to find that one image that'll stick in your brain and get to it quickly. And he's really good at that. He has some of the most beautiful imagery in his films, but the scripts vary in quality, and that's okay. It made things interesting for me. He also spends a great deal of time storyboarding his films, which I also thought was interesting because some directors won't do that, and he is like really meticulous about what exactly he wants. So he has a plan ahead of time, which I would appreciate as someone who does, a management role in film. He also shoots on multiple cameras at once. He's kind of known for that, which I find interesting. And I would love to see that in practice because I think the camera might be a little tricky to control if, the lighting would be difficult to plan if you're just doing, 6 cameras at once. But I think as an actor, it would be really exciting because all the choices you're making with your co-star, if you're filming a conversation with 2 people at the same time, you get to talk to each other and feel it out more in the moment rather than trying to recreate what you did like 2 hours ago when you had a different setup. So I don't know. And I honestly don't know how well that translates in his films. I haven't really noticed anything that I was like, I could tell that was filmed all at once. Something also interesting about him is he directed his first feature at 40. So he's been in this industry for almost 50 years, but he didn't really start until he was 40. His first film was The Duelists, his first feature film, and now he's almost 90. I can't believe he's still working. I think he still seems very with it and very he still wants to work from what I've read in some articles. So that's exciting. I'm curious to see what 90-year-old Ridley Scott has in store for us. Something about Ridley Scott, I'm not really a believer in the auteur theory, but I do think you can tell a lot about a director based on what projects they work on and kind of what things they want to focus on. And obviously some of these films that they choose to work on are because of the paycheck, but you can also notice story elements and themes that pop up over, especially a filmography of almost 30 movies. Something that Ridley Scott loves to talk about is rivalries. I mean, he has 2 movies with the word duel in them. I don't know where this comes from, but I think it's kind of funny that he's been doing this. Like his first movie was called The Duelists, and he's been directing movies about duels. Up until Gladiator 2, he's just been directing movies about people with rivalries for almost 50 years. It's very important to him to explore this, and maybe he's, working something out, but I think that's interesting that he does that. Another really specific thing that I've noticed before we get to our list, I'm almost there. Ridley Scott happens to have a few movies about one very specific kind of guy. It's a man who is a cop in New York City specifically that has a strange relationship with his wife and children. I don't know what the deal with that is. He's British, so I don't get it. But that's something to note, and I'll make note of it when we get to those. Ridley Scott also really likes to use a lot of the same actors like Russell Crowe and Sigourney Weaver. A lot of the people he works with frequently are also off-screen as well. People like Hans Zimmer, he's been working with since the 80s, which is kind of incredible that they've both been working that long. Just so you're aware, I am going to be talking about the plot points of some of these movies. If you want to go into these movies blind, go watch them and then come watch my ranking. But I will just warn you, there are going to be some plot spoilers here. I still have a lot more to say, obviously, but I need to get to the list. Off we go. At the bottom of the list, I actually almost missed this one. I had made myself a list of all the movies and had been keeping track of them. And then I realized partway through making my list that there was one missing that I just didn't end up on there. And that was this one, The Counselor. But The Counselor is at the bottom of this list, and I will tell you why. I said earlier that all of his movies are beautiful. I think this might be the only exception to this. I hated the color grading. I know that's really a specific nitpick to have about something like this, but it's just so ugly. I was like, because it's super saturated, but also they made it so that the darks are really dark, and so it was just kind of hard to tell what was going on. I just had a hard time seeing that, and I could have gotten over that if the story had been good, but oh my gosh. Basically, the story is these people work in crime, I think in drug dealing. Yeah, they work in drug dealing, and they talk like about life and philosophy, but it's not even particularly interesting stuff that they're saying about their lives as crime people. You don't actually really even see them do hardly any crime. And then they all kind of die in horrible ways. Like, crime doesn't pay, I guess, is the message here. Also, Javier Bardem has like the worst haircut I've ever seen. Why did they pick that haircut for him? Like, I know I've heard this story about No Country for Old Men. He was like, I can't believe you're making me have this haircut. I'm not gonna be with any women for the next little while. But that one made sense because he's a serial killer. This is just like, what if we made it look like Javier Bardem has been electrocuted all the time? That's like his look all the time. What if we did that? I don't know the point of that. Also, Bradley Pitt shows up in this movie. This is one of 2 times Ridley Scott has worked with Brad Pitt. And the other time is when he worked on Thelma and Louise with him, which was kind of like his break into fame. So it's kind of funny that he's in these 2 movies, and I really like Thelma and Louise. There's a scene where Cameron Diaz throws some kind of something out of the car, and he like chokes to death on this wire. It's very visceral and very terrifying, and that's like the one thing that has stuck in my mind from the entire movie. I really can't describe hardly any other scenes to you because it just kind of washed over me and I didn't process any of it. Anyway, I did not recommend this one. It was not good. It was, wouldn't recommend it. Next, we have Body of Lies. Another one where I really couldn't tell you much about it because I don't really remember. I sat through probably the first 10 minutes of this movie, watching it and being like, I feel like I've seen this. And I had seen it like a month before for this list, and I totally had just forgotten about it. I had just forgotten because the movie is so whatever that it totally spaced it. I can't believe that happened. And I didn't love this one, obviously. I think, if anything, even if your movie's not good, if it's boring, that's the worst thing your movie can be. This is the first on this list to have Russell Crowe in it, and he will be showing up a lot. There's also Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Strong. Mark Strong plays like this Jordanian man, which is kind of funny because I think he's British. It was kind of funny seeing him. So you think it's a bit weird that Mark Strong is playing a Jordanian man? He's British, and I mean, Ridley Scott's not really known for casting people accurately, which isn't great. He tends to favor more American and British actors, which is not super surprising, granted where he's from, but I do wish there was a bit more diversity in his casting. This is so not my kind of movie. I have no interest in this kind of thing, and it wasn't even done in a really interesting way. So it was just kind of whatever movie for me. Oscar Isaac does appear for like a minute. I mean, he's in the beginning. Anyway, that was fun. It's fun to see him. Always enjoy seeing him. But this is just not my kind of movie, and it was fine. It's not bad. It was fine. Next on my ranking is Someone to Watch Over Me. And this one is interesting because on paper, it sounds really interesting. This is one of his earlier films, so this is from 1987. And I like the vibe of this movie. It's New York City. It's rainy. This movie opens with this song written by Sting, which is really fun. So the story is basically this woman sees a murder happen. She's like, oh, shoot. And the guy, like the murderer, sees her see this happen. She gets away and becomes like a key witness to the trial of the guy who murdered another guy. And she falls in love with the cop that's keeping an eye on her and trying to protect her. However, their chemistry, I did not buy it. And the whole movie is about that. And so it makes it not a very interesting or believable movie. And his wife, the wife of the cop, is so cool. She's like the most interesting character in the whole movie. And so it's so frustrating to see him pick this other lady that he has no chemistry with. And you're like, what are you doing? Anyway, not that I'm like, you have to be morally right to be the protagonist of your movie. But I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe that he would pick her. So it made it really frustrating to watch for me. This is also the first of our rivalry movies. We'll be seeing this a lot between the cop and the murderer. I can't remember his name. But yeah, on paper, this sounds really interesting, but it just really, I did not buy it. I did not. Which is unfortunate because that was the whole deal. So that's why this one is so far down on the bottom of this list. This is the first of our movies with a cop who lives in New York City, who has a strained relationship with his wife and children. So this is the first of those. We'll be seeing more to come. Next in my ranking is 1492 Conquest of Paradise, which is basically Ridley Scott's Christopher Columbus movie. And it is very pro Christopher Columbus. So that kind of tells you kind of the tone we're going for here. Like even Christopher Columbus gets compared to Jesus at one point.
He chose a carpenter's son to reveal himself to the world.
So you consider yourself the chosen one?
That's kind of going on. And then even beyond that, the cultural context, right? It's okay. I think The sailing was really interesting because it starts off where he's like trying to get to, he's like, we gotta go. Is it west? West. We gotta go west. And so the first like hour is spent, maybe not hour, but a good chunk of time of him just trying to convince the government to let him go and have a crew and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. Anyway, I'm sure that's interesting to some people. Again, this is not a period of history I'm very interested in. So maybe there's some of my bias here. But he eventually gets there, and there's some interesting stuff that happens while he's there. But I kept wanting it to become Aguirre, Wrath of God, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I just wanted this to be that so bad. I mean, it's from a similar, like the setting of the film is from a similar time period. And the vibe is very much like these guys were absolutely crazy for doing this. Anyway, if you've seen it, you know more what I'm talking about. Highly recommend it though, if you haven't seen that. But I kept wanting this to be that so bad. I was like, I just want this to be Aguirre, Wrath of God. That's what I want to be watching right now. But it wasn't. This was released on the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus landing in the Americas. So it was meant to be kind of like this celebration of this guy. Also, why does Ridley Scott care? He's from England. The movies he makes me think that he's American, but he's not. He's not American. He's actually a Sir Ridley Scott. I should be calling him that. Sir Ridley. The music is actually really good in this one. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's really great. And Sigourney Weaver is also in this one. This is the first of many Sigourney Weaver movies. And she looks amazing. She plays a queen, I think. Anyway, she's a royal and wears these like beautiful dresses, and she looks amazing. So that was a treat. There's more rivalries here. Christopher Columbus has a few rivalries, actually. He has rivalries in the Americas and then also in Europe with two different people. So he's just got lots of rivals. Also, interesting fact, this movie did not do very well when it came out, and Ridley Scott took a 4-year break after it came out, which is huge for him because some periods of time he's directing like a movie every year or sometimes multiples of movies every year. So I don't know what that says about this one. Also, I don't know how to say his name, but the main actor who plays Christopher Columbus, Gerard, I think he's French. Depardieu, Gerard. Anyway, what I know him from is from the last holiday with Queen Latifah. And he's so fun in that. He's not like a huge part of it or any. Well, he's like a side character, but he's really fun. And so I was excited to see him in this because I recognized him, but he was fine. I don't know. Well, he's trying to do an accent. I think a Spanish. No, where is he from? Anyway, he's trying to do an accent that's not French. And it just kind of comes off weird. He was fine. And I'm sure he's a much better actor in other stuff. I wouldn't really know. I've only just seen him in The Last Holiday in this. This one was just fine. If you're interested in this period of history, I do think this would be worth a watch. But it wasn't for me. Next in my ranking is Hannibal. And for this list, I actually watched Silence of the Lambs. I had never seen it. Silence of the Lambs. Incredible. So good. Silence of the Lambs might be one of the best movies I have ever seen. And I know I'm like late to the party, but holy crap. But I watched it the night before I watched Hannibal. That was not a good idea. Hannibal, okay, it's not that bad. But compared to Silence of the Lambs, it's like so bad. Because Silence of the Lambs is like perfection. And the chances that they were going to capture this absolute miracle of a movie again with a different director and a different lead are very slim, and they didn't do it. So I did like getting to see Anthony Hopkins up to Hannibal shenanigans. I could have watched an entire movie of him just hanging out in Italy, I think is where he's at. Just doing, building his community of like art people. He's really into art and has like an art gallery and does talks and, is just kind of wry and silly. And there's all these undertones of like, he'll say stuff like that sound normal in context, but because he's a serial killer, feels like, oh, I can't believe he said that. It's creepy. And like that part of the movie was really fun. I thought, it's not like amazing or anything, but I enjoyed watching it. But the Clarice stuff, holy crap, what a drag. She spends the first like 2 hours or however long it is, most of the movie, in a basement, either on the phone or looking at like old documents, and she's just not really out and doing anything, which is so boring. I get that this is an adaptation of the book, but we could have at least given her something to do before the very end of the movie. Maybe that's just a me thing, but oh my gosh. And I know that Julianne Moore is a good actress. I've seen her in a few things that I was really impressed with, but here she was fine. But I don't think that's her fault. I think it's because she wasn't given very much to do. So, anyway. This also just didn't have, like, the intensity of the original. I think because it gets so violent so quickly. Silence of the Lambs is really not very violent until, like, closer to the end. And it's a lot more, feels more realistic. This one is just, like, really violent really quickly. And so you're kind of, like, desensitized to it, I think, as the movie goes on. I feel bad comparing it, but it's a sequel, okay? That kind of happens. That'll happen if you have a sequel to something. Also, I kind of forgot that Gary Oldman was in this. He's in this. He plays this kind of creepy guy. He kind of feels like only kind of related to what's going on. It just feels like it's trying to be like 3 or 4 different movies, and then they kind of come together at the end, but it feels kind of all over the place. But I really enjoyed seeing Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal again. So there's a rivalry between Hannibal and Gary Oldman's character. So there's that. Another rivalry. We'll be seeing a lot more of these. Next, we have Black Rain. I kind of feel bad about having this so low, but I just was... People seem to like it more now than they did. I don't know. It did really well when it came out, but like... I don't know what it was. I just couldn't get into it. And maybe I just watched it at the wrong time or something. But anyway, it's another rivalry film. Shocker. And then we've also got our second cop who is from New York. He doesn't spend the whole movie in New York, but has a strained relationship with his family. Why is this a thing again? I'm realizing, looking at this, that these movies were released 2 years apart. Black Rain and Someone to Watch Over Me. I get them confused, and I've seen them both. But I could see what if audiences were like, these are like the same movie. They're not. They are not, in fact, the same. Not even close. On paper, it sounds really fun. Basically, what happens is they find a member of the Yakuza in Japan. They're in New York. They go to take him back to Japan to get him prosecuted there, and go through their legal system. But he gets loose, and then, stuff happens, and he ends up spending the rest of the movie in Japan. And it's interesting to me how similar in production design this is to Blade Runner. So if Blade Runner's your thing, maybe check this out. It doesn't have the same sci-fi elements to it, but it's definitely got a similar vibe, I guess. Because it's Japan in the 80s. I mean, I did. There is an opening scene where Michael Douglas's character does like a motorcycle bike race, which I thought was kind of fun. But other than that, I thought it was okay. Also, this is Ridley Scott and Hans Zimmer's first collaboration together. And, like worked for the new Gladiator, or I don't think he did the music for the new Gladiator, but he did it for the first one, so that's fun. The soundtrack is very 80s sounding, but I kind of like it because it feels, I don't know, a lot like Hans Zimmer now. So I think that's fun. Next, we have White Squall, which is essentially, I would say this is basically Dead Poets Society, but instead of Robin Williams, you have Jeff Bridges, and you're on a boat instead of at a school, but the boat is also kind of a school. And then the ending is instead them getting into a shipwreck and some of the kids dying. I would say that like 70% of this is fun and it's interesting, and the relationships between Jeff Bridges and the kids and his crew are really believable. He does a great job. There's one scene that I really love where Jeff Bridges and his wife, who's played by Caroline Goodall, and they're dancing at a party, and there's just this cat on the party table in the foreground. It's like everybody's eaten and everybody's just been dancing and hanging out, and there's just this cat like going around and just eating different stuff on the table while they're dancing. I don't know, it's just like these little details, and I think Ridley Scott is really good at and creating a bigger world other than just what is happening to the characters directly, because they never address the cat. It never comes up. It just, you get to see it, and I just thought that was so fun. I love that. The thing that pulls this movie back is the final scene just becomes so ridiculous that I just totally got pulled out of the movie, and it ended with a bad taste in my mouth. Basically, the shipwreck happens and there's some kind of ship trial. I don't know who puts these on, but essentially they're trying to decide if Jeff Bridges should keep his captain's license or not. And that's what's at stake here, okay? He just got into a huge accident. His wife has just died. And they're trying to decide if they're going to take away his license to captain. And in my head, I'm like, I don't think he would want to sail anymore anyway. The ship that he had was gone. His wife is gone. Some kids died. If it were me, I'd be like, I'm done. But all the kids show up that survived, and they're like, you cannot take away this man's ship. Why am I keep wanting to call it a shipping license? His license to sail. And one of them pulls out the bell from the ship. And what they're trying to do here is recreate that moment in Dead Poets Society where they all get up on their desks. But it doesn't come off the same because the stakes feel so silly to me. I don't know. Maybe it's just a me thing, but my husband even came in. He hadn't seen the rest of the movie, and he was kind of laughing too. Because it just, it would have been pretty serious, and I mean, this is still serious, but it just came out of nowhere, and I was like, this is kind of crazy. It was fine. Next in my ranking is G.I. Jane. So G.I. Jane is basically about a woman training to become a special op in the army, and is the first one to do this. I think this happens now in real life, but this is like a fictional story. And she's played by Demi Moore, who so good in The Substance. That's unrelated, but this kind of feels like Ridley Scott's way of being like, now that feminism is doing what it needs to and women are in the workplace, what's one job that women don't have yet Let's put them in there. It's got kind of that 90s, like, look at how cool it is that women work now. It feels like this movie is really trying to say, if only we could fix this, the patriarchy would no longer be a problem anymore. But unfortunately, the patriarchy is still very much alive today. It just doesn't quite land coming in almost 30 years later, and things are not great. And that's not the movie's fault. There's no way Ridley Scott could have known that, but yeah, it doesn't land quite the same way, and it's not as good as Thelma and Louise, which basically is trying to say the same thing. But anyway, we'll get to that. Demi Moore is really good. I will say that. I don't think I've seen her in a lot other than this and like The Substance, which she's incredible in. Some of the physical stuff that she had to do for this movie just kind of blows my mind, and I'm very impressed by all of that, and I think that's cool. But I don't know. This movie was fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't super for me. Viggo Mortensen is in this, and the very first scene that you see him in, or one of the first scenes, is he's wearing these super short shorts. And I wish he kept wearing them because they were fun, but it was kind of hard to take him seriously because I just was like, he was wearing short shorts not that long ago. So, that's not his fault, but I also have a hard time seeing him not as Aragorn all the time because I've just seen those movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, so many times. But anyway, it's fine. It's not my favorite thing. It's not amazing. It's not bad. If it interests you, it's about exactly what you think it is. And then next we have A Good Year, which I think is Ridley Scott's only romantic comedy. It feels more like a drama than a rom-com. The rom-com parts of it were the best parts of it, and I wish there was more of them, but so much of the movie is spent being like, will Russell Crowe sell the property or not? And I just really did not care about that. I wanted him to fall in love with Marion. I don't know how to say her last name. Cotillard. She's incredible. I love her. Everything I've ever seen her in, she's always great. This is no exception here. She's not kind of in a lot to work with, but she's still fun to watch. It's set in France, mostly, and it's about Russell Crowe inherits this estate, and from his uncle, and his uncle, everybody around him is trying to tell him not to sell it. But he's like, I want to sell it. Anyway, it becomes this whole thing. He falls in love with Marion, and also Albert Finney is in this. He's the uncle, so we only see him in flashbacks, but he's always a treat. I love him in Big Fish, and this role feels very similar to that, actually, but it doesn't quite pack the same punch as Big Fish does, so all in all, it feels pretty safe. It's not like trying to reinvent the wheel or anything, but it's just fine. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. I guess if you want to see what a Ridley Scott rom-com looks like, go right ahead. Next, I have House of Gucci. Part of why this is here is because I don't really remember that much of it, and I saw it when it came out, so it's not like it's been that long. I do remember how fun the costumes were, and they were just so fun to watch, see them moving on screen, and then all the like press before the movie came out, and everybody was freaking out seeing Lady Gaga and Adam Driver in these like really stylish outfits. That was fun, and that was probably the best part of the movie, because the story itself was fine, and I know Adam Driver and Lady Gaga are really good. I just don't feel like they were given a lot to do here. I would love to see them in another movie together, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. Jared Leto was doing his thing. He's just kind of a weird guy, and you guys know that. But other than that, I don't really have a lot to say about this one. It's just kind of middle of the road. It's fine. Next, we have Matchstick Men, which stars Nicolas Cage. I think this is the only Ridley Scott movie that has Nicolas Cage in it. And honestly, he gives a pretty good performance. The reason that this movie is where it is because some movies where they're lying or trying to like pull one over on someone else, I get so stressed. My anxiety goes through the roof. Like, I tried to watch Catch Me If You Can once. I couldn't do it. I made it like 20 minutes in and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I can't. So that's why this is where it is. It's not because it's bad. It's because I just didn't love it. It wasn't for me. But I do think that Nicolas Cage gives a really good performance. The girl that plays his daughter, Alison Lohman, is also really good. Apparently she was like in her 20s playing this like 13-year-old or trying to look like she's 13. She did a great job. That was awesome. Sam Rockwell is also always a treat. He's fun. Playing, kind of the same character Sam Rockwell always plays. But he's really good at it. So, the script is really well done. I would say that's probably the best part of it, which is great. Again, it's just not my cup of tea. I think it's worth watching if you can handle people doing a con. I can't. It's not for me. Next, I have Napoleon, which the only reason that this is so high on this list is because of one scene, okay? There's this one scene. So, this is about Napoleon, right? Again, another period of history that I'm not super interested in. But I didn't know that much about Napoleon going into it. And I don't really know if I learned anything because I don't know how accurate it is. There's this one scene that just had my jaw on the floor. That scene where they're fighting on the ice. Holy moly. Ridley Scott doing what he does best. Fight scenes. Iconic imagery. Good pacing. Good tension. So good. That's why this is higher than all the things behind it. Because of that one scene. I will say the production design is pretty incredible. Shocker. This is a Ridley Scott movie. It also has one of my favorite lines of, "You think you're so great because you have boats." That's so funny. I don't know if that's meant to be funny, but it comes off that way. So I saw this in the theater when it came out. There was probably maybe like 5 people in that theater. There weren't a lot of people. And I was dying when he said that. I was laughing so hard. It's like, you think you're so great because you have boats. Anyway, iconic. So funny. I also, honestly, the real reason I went to go see this when it came out was because I love Vanessa Kirby in The Crown. I think she does a great job in that. And I was excited to see more of her in this. But this movie just really did not let her shine. I hated the way Napoleon treated her. And I imagine that comes from some sort of historical something. But, it was just heartbreaking to watch him treat her that way. And I had a hard time seeing all that. Anyway. Because she's so cool and, like, strong in The Crown. But this just, this was not fun. It wasn't fun to watch her, I guess. And I suppose not every character is supposed to be fun to watch and all that jazz. But anyway, I didn't love that part of it. Next in my ranking is All the Money in the World, which is a retelling of the true story of the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III and his grandfather's refusal to pay the ransom money. And he's like the richest man in the world, and he's like, I'm not gonna pay to get my son or his grandson. His daughter-in-law is played by Michelle Williams, and she spends the movie hanging out with Mark Wahlberg trying to get her son back. Christopher Plummer, who plays the grandfather, is an absolute treat. He is so good in this, and I can see why he got an Oscar nom for this. And I think it's interesting that originally they were going to have Kevin Spacey play the role, but Oh, they think they filmed it or most of it with him, but because of all the allegations against all the allegations against him at the time, they decided to reshoot with Christopher Plummer.
I make the call. I'm going to reshoot. Interestingly enough, Christopher was always on the list, and he's absolutely on the money.
I think Christopher Plummer nails it. I mean, I'm a big Christopher Plummer fan because I love Sound of Music, but also he has this gravitas to him that really suits this role, and it's like subtle. It's not like he's being overbearing because he doesn't have to be. He's the richest man in the world, right? So he's only on screen for like a tiny bit, but he really does leave a huge presence on this movie, even though he's not in it very much. Michelle Williams is great as always. It did make me want to watch Fabelmans again. The Fabelmans. She's really great, and that plays a similar role, but in this one, the stakes are a lot higher. So, it's a little different, but, playing a mom character, she's good. Mark Wahlberg was whatever. That part could have been played by anybody. I don't know, and maybe they would have turned it into something, but what he was doing was just fine. And all the scenes with the grandson, I almost wish we didn't have those, and we kind of were just like wondering how he was doing and what had happened to him, because anytime we would cut to him, I'd be like, oh, here we go again. He's still kidnapped. I know this. He's not with his mom. I don't need to know that he's making friends with one of his captors, or, how they talk about food or whatever. Anyway, that part of it I was so not interested in. But yeah, the rest of it was good. Christopher Plummer was great. He was great to watch. Next in my ranking is Exodus, Gods and Kings, which is Ridley Scott's version of the retelling of the story of Exodus, basically. And this movie already came at a disadvantage because I think Prince of Egypt is the best telling of that story, and it's beautifully animated, and it's a musical, and it's only like 90 minutes. It's perfect. You can't improve upon that. I'm so sorry. So already I was kind of like, why is this movie like 2.5 hours long? What are they gonna do that will be better than, the musical version? It's not better than the musical version, but I still think that there are some good things happening here. It is bloated. Shocker. It's a Ridley Scott movie. It's gonna happen. His movies, I usually expect them to be about 2.5 hours. So they're not all that long, but a lot of them are. Something that kept happening in this movie specifically is I would fall asleep and miss like an hour and a half of it, and then have to go back and be like, okay, I just slept through that. Because like what happened was I fell asleep at like before the like curses happen. Oh, the planks happen. And then I woke up and they were being chased, and the seas had parted, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've missed so much. And so I, woke up, went back, watched up to the point where I fell asleep, missed the last hour, and then I had to go back again. Anyway, I don't know what that says about this movie, but that was the only one of these that this happened in. I don't know what that means. Christian Bale, I think, was honestly not a bad choice for Moses. I think he has the kind of inner strength that Moses kind of needs. He's not, because Moses isn't like a very charismatic guy, and not that Christian Bale isn't and can't be, but the way he plays him I think really works for the character. Joel Edgerton plays his brother, which is kind of interesting because he's like super white, and not that Christian Bale isn't white, but I don't know, everybody's white in this movie, which I thought was kind of weird. Sigourney Weaver makes an appearance in this one. It's not very long, but it's fun to see her again in another fabulous outfit. This is also another big rivalry between Moses and his brother, of course. I think the best parts of this movie are the battle sequences. So if you're like, I'm curious about this, just watch like the battle scenes. Like there's one in the beginning that's not really part of the Bible story, but like it's shot really well. It's really cool. It's very big. So many of the battles in these are just on a scale that we just don't really see anymore, unfortunately. And he does such a great job doing that and capturing these like giant things. It's really cool to me. Next on the ranking is Alien Covenant. Alien Covenant is a sequel to Prometheus. Basically, it takes place a few years later, and there's a new crew trying to colonize a planet, and they happen to stumble upon another planet that seems livable on their way to another one. And shenanigans ensue. Lots of people die, just like, most alien movies. They die in horrible ways. I thought this was good. I like Prometheus more. I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, so it'll be further down on the list. But I will say, I had a good time watching this. I like the alien movies. I think they're an interesting universe. I do think this one, not to compare, but to compare to Prometheus, is a lot more fan service-y, and I don't know if that's really a good thing. Here, there's a lot of moments where I'm like, well, that's from Aliens. That's from Alien, where you're just like, okay, I've seen this before, and here it is again. And maybe that's more fun, like, if you saw the original when it came out, but I saw the original for the first time, like, 5 years ago. So it's pretty new to me. So something else that's funny is this movie takes rivalries to a whole new level. It's like, what if a robot had a rivalry with himself? Like, that's what's happening here between Walter and David. I think that's the best part of the whole thing. The rest of it with all the other characters is fine. It's not bad. It's okay. But all the stuff between David and Walter, and any scene with either just David or just Walter, is fascinating. And you can tell that's what Ridley Scott really wants to talk about. I get the feeling that Ridley Scott is more interested in that than the rest of it. Like, there's this one scene that I was just blown away by, where Walter and David are sitting across from each other, both played by Michael Fassbender, okay? And they are playing a flute thing, and they're handing it back and forth to each other. And it's a one take with two of the same people. How did they do that? How did they pull that off? And also, how did Michael Fassbender convincingly play these two characters that feel like different people? Anyway, just incredible work right there. My jaw was on the floor when that scene happened, and it just kept going and kept going and kept going. And honestly, you can like splice that kind of thing and whatever, and we have CGI now, but in order to make it look convincing, that's a lot of technical stuff that I don't understand, and I found really, really impressive. So great work on that specifically, guys. Next on my ranking is Ridley Scott's first film, The Duelists. I think this is worth watching if you were at all interested in Ridley Scott's filmography. It's really interesting to me because you can kind of see hints of like later Ridley Scott kind of sprinkled in, but it kind of feels different from everything else because I think it just doesn't have the same scope and scale as some of his other stuff, which isn't bad. I think it's good that it's focused. I think the more focused his movies are, the better. He has a hard time with these like big sweeping epics sometimes, and they just kind of get too big and it becomes unfocused and kind of unruly, I guess. But basically, their story is about two men in the Napoleonic Wars who keep dueling each other over the course of like 10 years or something. And the ending is incredible. The rest of the movie's like fine. And the sword fights are actually really cool. I would recommend those. I think they're choreographed by some famous stunt fight guy. And they feel really a lot more real than a lot of like fencing, because they start off fencing. It feels like less like a dance and more like they're actually fencing. If that makes sense. Like they're hurting each other. And anyway, it's just fascinating. And then the final duel between the two of them, they decide to use guns instead of just fencing, because they're like, you know what, let's finish this, we're done. And they end up like chasing each other in the wilderness kind of, and it's just so gorgeous. It's so beautiful. I'm like, oh, there he is, there's Ridley Scott, I see him right here. I think it's worth watching, especially for those like final 20 minutes. Absolutely incredible. Next on my ranking is Legend, and I feel like this is really high on the list. It's higher than it should be, but I just love this so much. Okay, so Legend is basically like, what if Ridley Scott made the sparkliest dark fantasy movie you've ever seen that just so happens to star a baby Tom Cruise? Oh, and Tim Curry also plays the villain. What's not to love? The story is not amazing. It's an original fantasy world, original story, and it's okay. Like, it's not anything groundbreaking. I mean, the bad guy, I think, is called the Darkness or something like that. It's not breaking new ground or anything, but holy crap, is it fun to look at and to watch. It is just covered in sparkles. I love sparkles. And the colors are just so vibrant and beautiful. And even like the villainous stuff just looks really cool. Tim Curry plays essentially the devil. And he's wearing these this like giant red suit. Anyway, and he's doing his thing. He's great. As always, he's a great villain. What more could you want? And then our protagonist is Tom Cruise. He doesn't quite have his like Tom Cruise-ness to him yet. I think Top Gun came out like the year after this, and that feels more like Tom Cruise now, even though he's still really young. But yeah, I thought this was really fun. I understand why people think it's just okay, but I really liked it. Even if it's not like amazing, it's still fun. I really enjoyed it. Next on my ranking is The Last Duel. I will say this was done pretty well. I think that it's great. They got a woman to help write Jodie Comer's section, which was the best part, by the way. The first part of it, I was like, okay, I don't really care about Matt Damon, but whatever, I'm here. And then Adam Driver's part was interesting, but then Jodie Comer's part just like sucker punches you and you're like, holy crap. Anyway, her part was really good. Jodie Comer is absolutely incredible. Holy crap. She has to convey so much stuff. She is so subtle, and you can totally follow what she's feeling and thinking through the entire thing, which is incredible. That's what you want to do as an actor, right? You want to be able to communicate to your audience where your character's at, whether they're saying what they're feeling out loud or not. And it's probably better if they're not saying how they're feeling out loud. I loved her part. And I get why the movie was structured this way. I could see what they were trying to go for, what Ridley Scott was trying to go for here, but it just didn't quite work because I thought Matt Damon was fine. He was not the best part of this movie. I think Matt Damon really thrives in roles where he can play somebody who's charismatic and, kind of wry and silly. But this guy was not that at all. He's very serious and very, takes things literally and can kind of get frustrated when he feels like he's not being heard and kind of over angry, which I just don't think Matt Damon played very well. And everybody else around him is doing incredible stuff. And the production design, again, always incredible. Whoever did Jodie Comer's hair needs a raise. But also, what was up with Matt Damon's hair? Who decided that? What was that for? Is that what the guy looked like? I don't think we would have known. This was too long ago. The initial battle scenes were kind of hectic, and I get that, like, it's kind of trendy now to make your battle scenes, like, kind of crazy and hard to follow. The actual duel itself was not this way. It was just the battles, like, leading up to the duel were kind of this way. But the actual duel itself was absolutely incredible. Like, you could just feel every hit, and the tension was just crazy. And I got to the point where I was kind of yelling in the other room. My husband was in here, and he, like, put his headphones on because I was being so, like, reactive to what was happening, even though I was watching this by myself in my living room. Next on my ranking is Robin Hood. And yes, it is a Robin Hood movie. That's exactly what it is. I will admit, I did not have very high hopes going into this because, I don't know, I feel like I've seen Robin Hood 100 times, and I love the Disney one, and there was a one on the BBC that I really enjoyed, but I was like, what is Ridley Scott gonna add to this conversation? Also, I feel like Russell Crowe was too old to play Robin Hood, but I think it worked. I think it all worked. I will say the first hour's kind of fine, but once it gets going, it's really good. Once we kind of have Robin Hood and Maid Marian in the same sphere, it gets really interesting. I think this, of all the romances Ridley Scott's ever done, this one to me felt the most believable. I loved seeing them together. The chemistry was so good, and it's so fun because they do like a fake marriage plot. How fun is that? No one told me that going into it. Anyway, I feel like the book talk fans would love this movie.
I sleep with a dagger. If you so much as move to touch me, I will sever your manhood.
I do think it's interesting that both Russell Crowe and Cate Blanchett are not, like, young in this. And I think it's interesting because it is an origin story for Robin Hood. I think that it works. I think it works here. But it is a little bit different because they're a little bit older. And not that they're, like, old, but they're not, like, young people either. It's always a treat to see Kevin Durand in something. I've been loving seeing him a lot this year in, like, Abigail and the Planet of the Apes movie. Especially in the Planet of the Apes movie. Holy crap, is he good in that. I hope we get to see more of him. In this, he plays a really, really small part, but it's fun to see. I love Cate Blanchett as Lady Marian. She's a powerful woman, but, like, also not in the way that, like, she's always fighting or whatever, but she's, like, trying to help the community and seems very, like, organized and community minded, which I think is a really cool way to have your female protagonist be. I don't know. I just think that's cool. Also, the final battle on the beach. Holy crap. That is so fun. I love it. It was so good. Like, the tension keeps building and building and building and building, and it's just so fun. And it's in this beautiful place. And anyway, I really love this movie. I just wish that the first hour was, like, cut down some. Because I just want, I feel like we're trying to get to the Lady Marian and Robin Hood stuff, which is way more fun than the initial, like, first hour. Oscar Isaac is also in this one, too. Up next on my ranking, I have Prometheus. So the first time I saw this was like a year after it came out on some kind of streaming something. And I had never seen an alien movie before Prometheus, which was kind of a weird way to begin because it feels so different from all the other alien movies in production design and just, like, storytelling and theming. But I love it personally. I will say parts of it don't work for me, but in general, I think it's fun because it's so ambitious and it does reach some of those, like, lofty questions it's trying to ask, but also some of it is kind of like, because it doesn't really explain some of it, but it doesn't really need to for parts of it. And I mean, it's about trying to find, like, God or, our makers, which is a lofty goal for a kind of grounded sci-fi flick. And I think it mostly pulls it off. I love the production design. I didn't realize this until rewatching it for this. The production design and just kind of the vibe of this really had a huge influence on me creatively in like college. Because I'm like seeing like the spacesuits and certain things. I'm like, oh, I wrote something like this after having seen this. And I guess it became part of my subconscious and I didn't realize I was pulling it from here. So thank you, Ridley, for that. I could talk all day about the production design. It is absolutely incredible. And I'm obsessed with the way it looks and feels and how you have like this glossy, beautiful spaceship and then the underground is all grimy and it feels almost dreamlike in a way because it's so visual. And I love that because, like, what a fun way to go about it. Rather than, like, over-explaining things, it just kind of feels like a dream. But like a dream and then a nightmare as things progress. I really liked Naomi Rapace as the main heroine. I feel like she does a good job. I don't know. I think it's fun that she's just super smart and is like able to figure out what's going on just based on like context clues, and like I totally believe that she could do that. It's not like, how does she figure that out? No, I could see why she is that way and it feels totally believable. I don't know if this is like a great alien movie. It's part of like the Alien universe, but it's kind of its own thing. Like there's no traditional xenomorph in it at all, which I kind of thought was cool. I know apparently audiences were like, where is the xenomorph? And that's why they showed up so much in Alien Covenant, but it's fine. Next on my ranking is Gladiator 2, the whole reason why I'm here. I actually liked Gladiator 2 a lot more than I was expecting. I was thinking going in that I was a little bit worried that it was going to be a rehash of the first one, which is super great. And this is not that. It's not as good as the first one. I got to see it in IMAX, which was really incredible. My theater was like 95% men for some reason. I found that kind of funny. I was a little bit worried that this would just be a retread of the original. And this wasn't that. There were a lot of characters that show up that you're like, oh, this is this character from the original one. But turns out they play a different role in this one this time, which is really fun. An important data point here before I move on. This is the only Ridley Scott movie with sharks in it, which is very important to me. I will say I couldn't figure out what kind of shark they were because they weren't on screen for very long. But I'm sure if I watched it again at home, I could maybe figure it out. But sometimes in movies, they just make the shark like a generic shark. So anyway, it seemed kind of like generic shark. Denzel Washington was an absolute joy to watch. He was super incredible. He just ate up this role, and I'm so glad that he's in this. Apparently, they wrote the role for him and were a little bit worried that he wasn't going to take it, but thank goodness he did because he was just incredible in this. This was my first time seeing Paul Mescal in anything, and I have to say I wasn't super impressed. I mean, he has the like physicality needed, but his presence didn't have the same gravitas that Russell Crowe did in Gladiator. And you know, they're basically playing the same part here, which is a bummer because a lot of the movie they spend talking about how he has this anger fueling him, and then it's just Paul Mescal kind of doing his thing. I don't know, he wasn't bad, it's just he wasn't the strongest part of the film, unfortunately. But he had a lot of great co-stars that really made it really fun to watch. Like the Emperors were really a delight. I had just seen, like the day before or 2 days before I watched this, I saw Thelma, which had Fred Heikigner. I don't know if that's how you say that. But anyway, he was great in Thelma. Made me cry. In this, he was just so different. It was fun to see these two pretty close together for me. He's very different in both of these. I will say a lot of this movie was just a joy to watch in IMAX because Ridley Scott is so good at scale and these giant, beautiful shots. It was so fun to see it just in this great detail. Because I've been watching all these movies at home for the most part. And so I'm kind of sad that I'm missing a lot of the detail, especially in these great big fight scenes and stuff. But it was so fun to see it on the big screen. And I also love how great he is, not just with like the big stuff, but with these little details that he throws in there. A great sense of like scale as far as the micro and the macro, which I think is really impressive. That's not just this movie that he does that in. He's really good at that in lots of his films. All of the battles, of course, are excellently directed. I loved the one on the water. I think that was really cool. I was really looking forward to that, and it lived up to the hype for me. I wish it was a little bit longer, but of course, I'm going to want it to be longer. And major spoilers for the ending here. So if you want to skip those, skip to here. I love that we get to see Denzel Washington fight. Like, get in a brawl. I did not expect that because he's not a young guy. And he also holds his own pretty well, all things considered. And I thought that was just so fun. Not at all what I expected to happen, but I loved it. And I think it's worth just seeing for that, honestly. He was awesome. Next I have on my ranking is Blade Runner. I will just say up front, I am not the biggest Blade Runner fan, but I can see why people like it so much. I think the conversations about robots are really interesting, and I think also explored really well in Alien Covenant, but that's another thing. I think that the newer one does a better job at what this one tries to do, but I don't think it's bad. It's just not for me, I think. The production design, of course, has had a huge influence on cinema and on sci-fi, and has just been a huge thing for a long time since it came out. And I can see the value in that. But this movie, it didn't quite resonate with me. But I can see why people like it so much. It's had such a huge influence. And that ending scene with the villain guy, incredible. That scene is really, really good. The rest of it, it's not for me. And I like the newer one. I like the newer one more. Next on my ranking is Black Hawk Down, which is so not my kind of movie, but I can tell that it's done so well that's why it's up so far. I don't think I'll ever rewatch it again, but I can see it for what it is, and it is absolutely incredible. I think it's crazy to me that this came out like 3 months after 9/11, because this feels to me like 9/11 cinema to a T, but it came out like they couldn't have made it, they made it before that, even though it came out after. Anyway, as I was watching it, I kept seeing stuff that I was like, Iron Man, the first Iron Man specifically, does that. Iron Man uses that font. Iron Man uses this color grading. Anyway, I was dying because I've seen the first Iron Man a lot. I really liked it growing up. I haven't revisited it in a while, but anyway, maybe the reason that this feels like 9/11 cinema is because it came out around that time, and so many filmmakers saw it and kind of tried to replicate it and felt like maybe it captured something about 9/11. I don't know. I often have a hard time with like modernish war films just because they're so visceral and violent, and that's really hard for me. But I will say this one was done really well. There are so many characters, holy crap, but I think that kind of adds to the chaos of the events that are happening, so I don't think that's a bad thing. The story is based around a nonfiction book about the crew of a Black Hawk helicopter that was shot down in the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993. Also, this is Tom Hardy's first feature film debut. He's not a huge part of it, but it's fun to see him, even though I have just seen the newest Venom movie, and that... Anyway, maybe I'll do that in another video, but it is not good. It's also interesting to watch a war film. Again, Ridley Scott is really good when he's focused over the course of 48 hours, rather than trying to do this sweeping epic, which I don't think is a bad thing, but you have to be really careful doing any kind of thing that takes period over like 20 years or more. But 48 hours, that's a perfect place for Ridley Scott to be, where he's focused, you know, he's in his lane, he's flourishing. And I feel like a lot of war films that are filmed about any time, like after the Vietnam War, or any war anyway, a lot of war films are, I think, in my opinion, are kind of ugly. This is not. It's a Ridley Scott film. He knows what he's doing. He's setting up these beautiful shots. It looks like it's grimy and dirty, but it's not ugly, if that makes sense. I think he does an incredible job managing all these actors and all these stories and all, you know, there's like not only like what's physically happening, but there's like other emotional storylines happening in some places that you're able to follow. And there's like characters, groups of characters in multiple locations that you're keeping track of. It's a miracle this movie makes any sense at all, because there's like probably 30 characters that you keep track of at some point or another. Maybe not 30, but at least like 15. And it's absolutely incredible that this movie works at all. Up next in my ranking is The Martian, which I think is just a really great crowd pleaser, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, I'm a part of the crowd. I want to be pleased. I'm paying money to be here. I want to have a good time. It's not like reinventing the wheel or anything, but it's really a good time. Matt Damon gets to shine here. I think if someone else had been cast in this role, it wouldn't have worked as well. He really just has to talk to himself so much for this movie. It's absolutely incredible. It works as well as it does. The story is honestly not that complicated, but I think that works here. Again, giving Ridley Scott limits, you know, putting the story, not trying to branch it out over many, many years is better for him, I think. But yeah, I think it's fun. I think it's one of his better, more recent films. And I wouldn't be mad if he did more stuff like this. I think he's really good in sci-fi. You know, I don't think he's made a bad sci-fi movie. So if he wants to do more, I wouldn't be mad about that. Next on my ranking is Kingdom of Heaven, which I will say I haven't seen the director's cut of this one yet, but I still see so much of a good movie, even with the cuts made in the theatrical cut. This story is about Orlando Bloom's character kind of gets plucked out of his home and life. Well, he didn't, his family just died, so he, doesn't have a lot going on for him. And his father comes and finds him and is like, hey, come help me take back the Holy Land, essentially. And so the movie is about him kind of becoming more of a leader and kind of the big scale things of what are happening and, what's happening to Orlando Bloom's character specifically. I guess the events themselves are not really accurate, but I don't know. Whatever he did here, I think is interesting. And if you're making a movie, I think that's more important. A lot of the time. I will say it does feel a bit incomplete, but I know that's because there's a director's cut out there that I still need to watch, because there's like little bits of story that like get introduced and then like never come back, and you're like, okay, there's something got cut here. But what is there is really good. Like the Edward Norton, I think, who plays the king, is just, he's not in it very much, but he does such a good job as this kind of sad but almost mythical character. He does such a great job. And the battle scenes, holy crap. Like when I say Ridley Scott does visual storytelling really well. This movie is a huge part of what I'm talking about. It is just absolutely incredible. The scale and just complexity of what's happening in the frame on these scenes. You're just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And this is in 2005, so it's not like, I mean, maybe some of it's digital, but even then, it feels tactile, it feels real, and you're just kind of like, holy moly, I can't believe what I'm looking at. I just was blown away by the scope of this movie. I really think this is where, like I've been saying, that Ridley Scott's better when he's focused, but I think this is like the one exception because the story spans such a long period of time. There's so much going on, but it's executed really, really well. And I think it works here, even in just the theatrical cut. And I think most people say the director's cut is the better one. But even in just the theatrical cut, it is still absolutely incredible. So highly recommend watching this one if you can get the chance. Next on my ranking is American Gangster, which is basically, I think this is Ridley Scott's only like gangster movie. It takes place in the 1970s. Denzel Washington plays a leader in the drug trade, and Russell Crowe plays a cop that's trying to find him. And guess what? Here's our last of the cops who live in New York that have a strained relationship with their family. There's that. Denzel Washington is so fun to watch. If he asked me to work for him, even in this job, I would. Holy moly. He is so interesting and just so incredible. Obviously, I think every movie I've ever seen with Denzel Washington, he's just incredible. And this is no exception. Not even a little bit. He's absolutely incredible here. And Russell Crowe is fine. He's not bad. When I was watching it, anytime it would cut to the Russell Crowe storyline, I'd be like kind of waiting for it to go back to the Denzel Washington parts because he had more interesting stuff going on and I liked watching him. It was also fun to see Josh Brolin in there and Idris Elba. I love Idris Elba, who also shows up in Prometheus. Anyway, I love him because I love him in Pacific Rim. It's not like a critically acclaimed role of his, but I love watching him in that anyway. And it's another incredible rivalry. You know, we've got a lot of these on this list. And the face-off between the rivals is really interesting here because I think it's the only one of Ridley Scott's movies where the rivalry doesn't end in like physical violence. Like I think there's a chase scene that happens, but they're actually like confronting each other is a conversation. And holy crap, that scene is so good. It's worth having the Russell Crowe bits to get to this final conversation between the two of them. It is absolutely electric and such a great way to like kick off the ending of the movie. Highly recommend this one. And I also just love the 70s, you know, so it was fun to see Ridley Scott do a period piece from a time period he's lived through, because most of them are either like he's either making movies about the far future or like the distant past. So it's kind of interesting to have this in here too. Next in my ranking is Thelma and Louise. So fun fact, my grandma was named Thelma Louise and I'm named after her. And these are actually her earrings that I'm wearing also. I didn't really do that on purpose. They just matched better with what I was wearing. Anyway, I wonder what she would think of this movie. She passed away before it came out, but if I ran into someone named Thelma Louise, I'd be like, have you seen Thelma and Louise? Anyway, I love this movie, okay? I do think it's kind of hard to watch 30 years on and be like, nothing has changed sadly, since this movie came out. Because it's interesting to see them, like, having these conversations about, like, if, the cops were to ask us what happened, do you think they would actually believe us? And I'm like, that's still the case now. Anyway, this is really some of his best work. The script is just so good. These characters are so, you feel like real people. They feel so fleshed out. And it hugely helps that Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis are just absolutely incredible in this. I love Susan Sarandon's just like toughness, but she also has this like tender side to her that she shows to Gina Davis's character. And then, Gina Davis is a lot more innocent and sweet, but she becomes like less that way as the film goes on, and you can see her change as it goes on. And I love any kind of road trip movie, I'm American. There's nothing more American than like a cross-country drive. Either running from something, running to something. That just feels very American to me. Which again, what is Ridley Scott directing all these movies set in America? I also love how different this feels than other Ridley Scott movies, even though there is still kind of a rivalry between the Thelma and Louise and the cop guy who was in The Duelists. Fun fact. This is absolutely incredible. And the ending, I love the ending. It's so good. It sounds like they had a hard time deciding what the ending was going to be, which is like, I get it, because there's so much happening and we're like, do we want to end it happy? Do we want to end it like this? How do we want to make it happen? But I think what they had was absolutely perfect. And I bought the Criterion version. It's kind of behind me. It's kind of hard to see, but I'm thrilled to have it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Up next on my ranking is Gladiator, the movie that started this whole thing. I think this is the best of the rivalries of Ridley Scott's. You really hate Joaquin Phoenix's character, and you want Russell Crowe to win so bad. Russell Crowe also does an incredible job in this movie. He carries... this is so much movie to carry, but he does such a good job. And you just feel for him. You want him to succeed. And you see all these things coming up against him, but you're like, no, you gotta... Anyway, it just feels like a movie of a movie. I don't know if that makes sense. I was initially apprehensive because I was like, that's a Dan movie. That's a film bro-y movie. But I get it. I'm a fan. I get it. I see the vision. I see the light. It's so good. And I think this is his best period piece. The production design and just overall everything is done so well. Joaquin Phoenix is incredible at playing a creepy guy. Shocker. He's really good at that. And he does such a great job, and you really just want Russell Crowe to win. And so many of the images, especially from the ending where they're doing their final fight, are just like seared into my brain. And I just could not get it out of my head for like a month after. And that takes, I watch so many movies that like, it takes a lot for me to like keep thinking about a movie longer than like a week. Yeah. And the other fights are really good too, but that last one, the tension is there. You've been seeing their rivalry build across the course of the film. Like everything is leading to that fight. And it, like, some movies, they have that final thing and you're like, the lead up was way more interesting than the fight. No, the payoff was amazing in this final battle. Oh my gosh. So good. Absolutely incredible work here. I am so impressed by everybody in it. It just is amazing. Last, but certainly not least, is Alien. I think this is Ridley Scott's only perfect movie, and that's why this is here. I am not a horror person. However, this is one of the best horror movies I have ever seen. One of the best sci-fi movies I have ever seen. And I get that I'm not saying anything new here, but holy crap. It is so good. It feels like Alien is so good. The pacing, the dread, the sound design, the camera work, the images from that movie are seared into my brain forever, not just for a couple months after, but I think about the shot of the face of the cat, the shot of like even just Ridley in the spaceship, in the computer thing, the shot of the robot's head. There's just, it's so iconic. And then the design of the alien itself. Whoa. Just, one of the most iconic monsters there's ever been. Like, everybody knows what the alien looks like. And I can't even imagine, how cool would it be to see this for the first time, not knowing what was coming? How crazy.
Sorry, sir, that you brought your son along to see Alien.
No, ma'am, I think he should have seen it. It's something that he needs to know, that things like that could happen in life. That could be a true story.
I am very grateful that my first viewing experience of this movie was actually at a theater. I think it was the 40th anniversary for the movie, so it would have been in like 2019. And oh my gosh, it was so fun to see it in a theater, on the big screen, with a big audience. It was just a delight. I also very fortunately got to see 2001: A Space Odyssey in the theater for my first viewing. Also incredible. I should make a video about that later. Anyway, I just love this movie. It's so hard to talk about because it's just so good. With this one too, I was a little bit apprehensive about going to see it because I was like, it's a horror movie. The way I found out about my first introduction to Alien as a concept was on the Disney ride. And I was terrified of the alien jumping out of the vents and stuff. And I was like, I will never see that movie. But I was also like 10. So anyway, this movie is just so good. Sigourney Weaver, absolutely incredible. How fun is it that we have this cool heroine that, takes care of a cat. I love that the cat makes it. How fun is that? There's a cat and the cat survives. She takes care of the cat. I also love Aliens, but that's it. Not Ridley Scott. Well, that's another video for another day. But I adore this movie, and I think it takes all of Ridley Scott's strengths and just puts them together. The production design is absolutely incredible. Had a huge influence, also in a different way than Blade Runner. Had a huge influence on the way sci-fi looked after that. Yeah, the alien design is absolutely terrifying and creepy and so otherworldly, but so tactile and real because it's like a suit. I know he said that he's going to direct more Alien movies, but we'll see if that actually happens. And that's my list. This was so fun to put together. I'm definitely going to be doing something like this again. I want to thank you if you've made it this far for watching this video. I've had a blast watching all these movies and writing about them, and really just getting to spend time with Ridley Scott as a person, even though, like, again, I think directors are kind of like the head of the ship, but they're not the whole of the creative process. It obviously depends on who you have with you, whether things are going to go well or not, and like what the outcome is. And none more clear than with Ridley Scott, because some of his movies turned out incredible and some not so much. And I think it's amazing that he's made so many films. And I keep thinking about all these people who got to work on these fun films because, you know, he was directing them and getting these projects together and being organized and actually making them happen, because making a movie is so hard. Making 29 movies over the course of, 45 years is way harder. And it's very impressive. So I just feel like I have a newfound appreciation for his work. And when I find something that he's done well, good for him. So again, thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun putting this together, and I'm hoping to do more because I'm having a good time. I don't know if you're having a good time, but I'm having a blast. So I'm going to keep making these until I run out of stuff to watch, which will never happen. So there's that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'd love to hear what your favorite Ridley Scott movies are, and if there are any that are on this list that you're thinking of maybe watching, because there was some stuff on here that I just didn't know existed until I started this list, so that wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, thank you for watching. Gravitas that Russell's Crowe. Russell's Crowe. And then you think you're so great because you have boats.